Morning. Good morning, everyone. As always, it's so wonderful to see you. Feels like a family reunion every Sunday. We had a ladies' night. Some of the young moms and wives had a painting night last night. Anissa had for us, which was amazing, and it was awesome because I saw everybody last night. But then we got together again this morning. I got to see everybody again, and it's like I can't get enough of you guys. I just love you. So good morning. Today, I want to talk about creating an environment for growth. And last week, Pastor Mike finished up our series on beginning a new year with God. And I feel this actually, I don't think there's any message you could give that wouldn't be a good message for beginning a new year with God. But I feel like this one does actually fit in with it as well. But I want to be talking about creating your environment, your personal environment, your spiritual environment that supports you in your growth and supports you in coming closer to God. So I want to start with a few Bible verses just to kind of set the tone and get us thinking about it. We're going to start with Romans 12:2. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that, I think it's supposed to be what that is good. What is that is good? Anyway, sorry about that. What is good and acceptable and perfect to God. So do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And this one is Ephesians 6:11-12. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood. We're not talking about physical armor here. We're talking about a spiritual armor. We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. And then this one, which I really love, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. So, in talking about creating our spiritual environment, I'm hoping that this is conveying, that hope this is sparking you, like, oh, this is not just something nice, but it's actually important. It's actually crucial for my life. It's actually crucial for my spiritual life. So I thought about talking about this topic. We had a couple of conversations this week, really awesome. We had a couple over for dinner, and we were talking about marriages and relationships and what makes them work and what is necessary for them to succeed. And one of them was communication. But another one, which we don't always think about, was what kind of environment do you put your couple in, or especially what kind of people do you have? What kind of a support network do you have that encourages you in your relationships, that where people have the same kind of goals and ideals so you can walk forward together with them? And we were also talking about how in many countries it takes a village to raise a child. And in America, we've all kind of gotten into our little nuclear families, and as soon as you're 18, you leave your house and you go somewhere else. And these days, you're moving across country for jobs and work, and many times we're separated from our village or the people that we grew up with and the people who know us best. But there's actually really a benefit in this environment so even if you're not with your physical family or your parents, maybe they wouldn't be the most supportive people, but creating a village or an environment of people that supports you. So we were kind of having these conversations about what do we surround ourselves with? And I was reflecting on my own life, and I felt, actually, I'm so grateful. I feel so blessed that I have so many positive influences in my life. I have you guys, have this wonderful community. You know, both Mike and I have our parents alive and supportive and wonderful grandparents for our kids. I feel like we have many good friends that have the same kind of goals and ideals as us. So when we talk with people, we're usually lifting each other up. I take for granted what it's like to have those people in your life, because I know that when you have somebody who's constantly saying negative things or discouraging you, it can be very hard to feel like you can do what you want to do and accomplish the things you want to accomplish. And last night we had our ladies' night, and it was just so uplifting and special to share that time with other like-minded people. So I was feeling like, wow, I have so many wonderful things going for me. But then actually, when I was thinking about this and looking at myself objectively, I also realized that despite all these wonderful things I have going for me, sometimes I'm not so proactively creating that for myself. And if I'm not proactively creating that for myself, it's like the world finds its way into my life. Right? If I'm not constantly renewing my mind or transforming myself to be renewed by my mind, the world creeps in. And I was reflecting on this last month. How much time did I spend on my cell phone just doing nothing of value? And I didn't like the answer that I had for myself. I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but I was like, how did this device, which used to be a flip phone or used to be a dial phone, how did this device become the thing that I spend most of my life with and spend so much of my time looking at? And how much value does it really offer to me? And I felt, anyway, it was a little bit of a sobering fact. and then after I thought about that, I thought, well, how else am I spending my time? When I'm driving in the car, am I listening to uplifting music? Am I having constructive and inspiring conversations with my kid or with my kids or my husband? Or do I spend that time complaining to myself about how I wish things were going? Or do I listen to things that aren't always uplifting? And I try to I'm reflecting on myself here. I try to listen to uplifting music, but I realize that when I'm not listening to music and when I'm interacting with my kids, many times it's frustrating because I kind of let them control the conversation a lot of the times, and usually it's, they get out of school. You've heard this thing where kids, once they get out of school, they get into their safe zone and they can just everything from the day. And I realized I just kind of let them do that, but then we get home and we're like, all right, get out of the car, get all your stuff. Why is it taking so long? And then I'm the one who's spewing back onto them. And so I realized they need to have that time to, let go. But I feel like if I'm not consciously creating an environment for them, then there's no positivity created. Anyway, I was just looking at these different aspects of my life and feeling like, although I have many great things going on in my life, I can honestly say that I haven't really intentionally created a spiritual environment for myself that supports my ideals and my goals this past month. So, so I want to share one more quote. This is from our founder, Reverend Moon. Understand the preciousness of the days during which you can make use of your body. They give us our one and only opportunity to use our bodies to resurrect God and the universe and to unite the world. So what I really felt like, what my experience was, is I was not really paying attention to this. I wasn't present to this fact that these days are precious. What I have to do with these days is an important work, and it's a good work. And I'm not valuing them, so I'm just letting the world kind of creep in. So, but why do we want to create an environment for growth? What is, I can say this is something important and good and we should do it, but what is the benefit for us, and why would we be motivated to own my spiritual environment, to create that environment, and to put things in place to protect my heart and encourage my growth? Well, when we have a good spiritual environment, I can say from my own experience, I notice opportunities when they arrive. And I feel equipped to take them on and act on them. I know that when I'm kind of being influenced by circumstances, overwhelmed by things that are going on in my life, even if something great comes along, I might not always recognize it. I might not always be able to act on it. Another reason why we want to create a good spiritual environment in my life is that we feel more satisfaction in our accomplishments, and especially in our relationships. And I feel most importantly is when we create a good spiritual environment, what we've actually done is created a space for God. And we can experience God more frequently, more deeply, and in more ways in our life when we intentionally create that space for God. On the other hand, what does it feel like if we are not owning our environment, if we're not intentionally making that space? This is just my personal experience. Maybe you can relate. I often feel irritated. I feel irritated by circumstances, by people. Anything can irritate me more when I'm not creating a space or I'm not being intentional. We might also feel stagnant, like we're not going anywhere. And we feel like things happen to me more than I make things happen. So there's I think maybe you've had experiences in both arenas, and you can relate to what it's like when it doesn't really matter what's going on in my life or in the world, but I know what I'm doing, I know who I am, and I'm moving forward, right? There's this it's powerful, it's an empowering feeling. But I think we can also have probably all been in this part where things just don't go our way no matter what we do. Things are always happening to me, and I'm just reacting to things rather than creating things. So with that, then I feel like we need to look at, this is a very practical message I'm giving today, okay? Look at our daily schedule. How much time is spent doing what? If I say that I'm a person of faith and God is important to me and my family is important to me and relationships are important to me, how much time of my day, what percentage is spent devoted to those things? And are the things that I'm doing helpful to my heart, mind, and relationships? Do they make space for God, or do they crowd God out? So I wanted to kind of break this down into different senses, because it's just a very practical way to look at it. But think about our eyes, think about our ears. What do we spend our time looking at? What do we spend our time listening to? What do we spend our time doing with our hands? What do we spend our time eating? Is actually, I feel like it can be part of it. Our health is very important, but more importantly, what are we saying with our mouth? So, what do we look at? Looking at our eyes. What do we spend our time looking at? Do we spend some time every day to look at God's words and take them in with our eyes? How much time do we spend looking at videos on YouTube that are negative or don't add any value to our life? When we look at people, do we look at the good in people, or do we look for the bad in people? The things that we do with our hands. This is like the most practical thing. What can I do today that God would do if he had hands? And I think everybody could come up with some simple answer for that. And in doing that, we create a space for God to be there with us. But many times we just do things out of habit. We just do things because we're used to doing them. We do things because they have to be done. But how much are we intentionally doing the things that God would do? Our ears, what do we listen to? This is a great Like I mentioned when we're driving in the car, you know. I try to listen to the Christian music while I'm driving. Sometimes it's really inspiring and sometimes it's not, but at least it's always positive, you know. But I remember a few years ago, we were listening to the comedy station a lot, and it was enjoyable. There was a lot of really, I mean, you gotta laugh sometimes. But overall, over time, it was like, I always felt more depressed after listening to it. Always making fun of people, always making fun of the state of the world, and it was a little bit of like a doomsday feeling by the end of it, you know. But also, what else do we spend our time listening to? Do we surround ourselves with people who speak good words? Or do we listen to the negative words of other people and let that affect us? I have another video that I want to share with you, actually. And I hesitated when I thought about showing it because it really kind of shows what it is the extreme opposite when we don't own our life, when we don't create space for God. And I really like to focus on the positive. I'm a person who likes to talk about constructing and building and creating and like experiencing God. But I also recognize that that's not what most of this world is experiencing. And also, it's like paddling up a river. If you're not paddling upward, you're moving backwards. And so as much as I like to talk about growth and amazing experiences and, you know, inviting God into our life, I also recognize that when we're not doing that, it's not a big distance between stopping or, you know, being stagnant and then letting the world control us. So I wanted to share this video as well because I feel like it's very moving and it can say a lot more than I can in words. So I'm going to share this video with you. It's called Slow Fade. Oh, well, where'd it go? It's coming. Is that it? I passed it? Okay, it was dark. Can you turn it up a little bit?
You know what? It's not about you. Business. This is a need. A need. Another woman. You make me sick, Roy.
Oh, you make me sick too.
Crazy. Yeah, I do.
It's the second glance that ties your hands as darkness pulls the strings. Be careful, little feet, where you go, for it's the little feet behind you that are sure to follow. It's a slow fade when you give yourself away. It's a slow fade when black and white have turned to gray and thoughts invade. Choices are made, a price will be paid when you give yourself away. People never crumble in a day. It's a slow fade. Flattery leads to compromise. The end is always near. Be careful, little lips, what you say. For empty words and promises when you give yourself away. It's a slow fade when black and white turn to gray and thoughts invade. Choices are made, a price will be paid when you give yourself away. People never crumble in a day. Daddies never crumble in a day. Families never crumble in a day.
Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. For the Father up above is looking down in love. Oh, be careful, little eyes, what you see. Daddy, where are you going?
I gotta go on a business trip.
Do you have to?
Well, maybe they can do without me this time.
It's pretty powerful, isn't it? Like I said, it's also kind of heavy. But I also recognize that there's probably nobody in this room who hasn't been affected by somebody who struggled with a slow fade in their life. And we can't change other people, but we can change ourselves, and we can make space in our life for God to change us. And the prevention for that is creating that space, and it's intentionally using our eyes and our mouth and our hands and our words and our actions for good. And with the clarity that we have in those things, we don't have to worry about slipping backwards. There was the line in that song, "Be careful if you think you stand. You might just be sinking." And it's just like the river. If you're not going forward, you're probably going backwards. So I just wanted to kind of share that to help bring it home. One more point I wanted to talk about, besides the things that we specifically do ourselves with what we read and what we listen to and the words we say, especially is the people that we spend our time with. I passed this one before. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. And then, two are better than one, because they have a good reward for their toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if two lie together, they keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, two will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. So it's so important, the people that we spend our time with. Please surround yourself with good people and people who can uplift you and energize you. How many people are trying to do this on their own? I feel like many times we feel like we have to find our way on our own. And it's true, nobody can walk your steps for you. Oh, there's a song that goes like that. What's that old song? You gotta walk that lonesome valley. You gotta walk it by yourself. Anyway, so you can't make other people do things, and other people can't do your responsibility for you. But it becomes easier when we have good people around us. Actually, there's a lot of books that talk about this. If you read personal development books, financial books, they all say surround yourself with the people who are doing better than you so that it automatically encourages you to do better. I do want to offer a disclaimer, though. Many times in these books, they say separate from the people who bring you down, because it's hard to remove yourself from their words and their actions and the things that are negative. And I see the value in that. I see the logic in that, but I've also struggled with it personally, because I feel if we always are just surrounding ourselves with the people that we like, the people who make us feel good, how are we going to change this world, right? Because there are people who need us. There are people who need positive words. There are people who need to be surrounded with us. Who will help the struggling people? So I feel like as people of faith, we have a little bit of a different calling. I think that it's important for us to sometimes intentionally go into difficult situations. Sometimes it's important for us to intentionally be with difficult people. Because I think that's where growth happens, when we get out of our comfort zone, and that's also where restoration happens and relationships are healed. But in order to be effective in that, we first have to have our spiritual environment. We need to be reading good things. We need to be listening to uplifting things. We need to have an environment that we have created that empowers us. And then with that, being, Reverend Moon calls it being the subject, right? Wherever you go, if you are the subject and you have God with you, then you can effect change around you. But if we just go into a negative situation, we hang out with people who are negative, if we listen to things, read things, say things that are negative, then we don't have any power to affect change. We won't have what it takes to lift up somebody else. So I felt that this was a really important point, that for us to be the people that God calls us to be, we have to create and own my life and my environment. So I have a couple of quotes to finish with. This is from Reverend Moon. It is very difficult to break a habit. While living in the satanic world until now, you have cherished self-centered habits. These harden and set like cement. How do we eradicate them? To get to heaven, one needs to replace all those past habits with God-centered habituality. So we need to create the space for God, invite God into our life. In order to create that space, we have to let go of some things. Each person knows what their own habits are, the things that hold them back or weigh them down. We need to make space and create God-centered habits to replace those. And then lastly, come close to God, and God will come close to you. I hear people say all the time, I want to experience God. I want to know God. We're practicing a song in the band called Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord. And we want to sing that with you guys soon. But I want to see you. I hear that. I want to see God. But we first have to open that door. We first have to make those habits. We first have to take the first step to kick out the things in our life that are filling up our time and crowding God out, and create new structures and put them in place so that we can let God come close to us. That's our personal responsibility, I really feel. And then once we have that, then we have something to share with other people. Then we have a way to show other people how to invite God into their life. But before we want to change the world, and Reverend Moon talks about this, before I seek to dominate the world, before I seek to change the world or make a difference, I first must change myself. I need to own my life and invite God into my life. So I think there is a lot in this message. I think it can hit everybody differently, and so I'm thinking of each of you, and I hope that It's not judgmental towards you. But I know that sometimes we judge ourselves. And I think that sometimes we need to look at ourselves objectively so we can see what are these things in my life that are either preventing me from experiencing God and growing, or on the other side might be dragging me down. I might be sinking. If I'm not looking closely, I might be sinking. So I think that with reflection, each one of us can find a point here that will help us guide us to invite God closer to our lives. So I'm going to leave you with that today. Please join me in prayer. Heavenly Parent, good morning. Thank you so much for a beautiful, beautiful morning, a beautiful day. Thank you for the sunshine, Heavenly Parent. I'm so grateful it didn't snow today so that we had the chance to come together. God, please be with each person today as we digest and reflect on this message. We know that you want to live in our hearts, and you really are looking for people that you can experience joy with. God, there's so much difficulty in this world. There's so many people who are crying out in pain and suffering, whose families are falling apart, who feel like their lives are falling apart. And you want to be there, and you want to take each person into your heart and embrace them and show them love. But God, you also are hoping to experience love yourself. And I pray that we can be those people who invite you into our lives, who experience true joy with you and share true joy and love with people around us. Please help us to look at ourselves and to guard our eyes and our ears and our words, to check what we do and hear and say, so that the things that we do and hear and say can reflect you rather than my own selfishness, Heavenly Parent. Thank you so much. We want to offer this service to you. Please be with us as we go into this week. And I offer this prayer in my name, Michael and Adonia Hendrick, blessed and your family. Amen and adieu. Thank you.